You ready? The world's best food channel. It's a flavor explosion. You're gonna love it.
Whoa! Holy cow!
And it's all on Gusto TV.
Thanksgiving 2004 should have been a festive day for Chris Mader's family. But instead of looking forward to a feast, they're planning a funeral. Everyone in the small town of Waldorf, Maryland, is wondering why someone gunned Chris down on his way home from work last night.
It hit everybody very hard. It was very surreal in a sense because you have someone that's so nice that would never do harm to anybody, and then to meet such a violent end, it just wasn't right.
There were just so few clues. It was bizarre for someone to be killed this way in his car on a road a few blocks from his home early in the morning, Thanksgiving Day. Nothing was taken. Where's the motive? Where's the killer? It was a great puzzle for the police.
Detectives are hoping a 911 call that just came into dispatch might give them the break they need.
I was traveling down 301 earlier tonight, and I believe there were shots fired at someone's station.
As the call goes on, police start to suspect the caller with the shaky voice is not the good Samaritan they were hoping for.
So that was automatically a red flag because 301 is a busy highway. I mean, there are tractor trailers, it's multiple lanes, there's people driving up and down all hours of the day and night. Let me tell you, if you're driving down 301 and there's shots fired on Smallwood Drive, unless you're on Smallwood Drive, you're not going to know what's going on.
Then, the devious do-gooder does something even more suspicious.
For some reason, the 911 caller abruptly hangs up the phone, and that's all police have.
Sure seems like the caller has inside information on Chris's murder. But whatever he does know, he's keeping to himself. Since dispatch has a record of the phone number, detectives easily track the call back to a payphone in Laurel, about an hour from Waldorf. Police race to the scene, but by the time patrol cars arrive, there's not a soul in sight.
Investigators went in, they pulled surveillance, they interviewed people in the area, they did everything they could to try to figure out who this caller was, but unfortunately, it was just another dead end.
Since no one saw the questionable caller, police call in CSI techs to see if they can find any physical evidence on the phone itself. But despite a thorough search, they come up empty-handed.
That 911 call was just a tantalizing clue in a case that had few clues.
And as detectives get into their cars to head back to Waldorf, they get a call from the coroner, who confirms that Chris was killed by a single shot to the head. An execution-style shooting that has police wondering if this was personal.
When someone is shot in the head one time, it appears that it is a target murder to take this young man out. The question is who did it and why.
This is a case where you have a young man who has no criminal history, no enemies, nothing on the surface that seems that he would be in any sort of trouble whatsoever. That just made the stakes even higher to investigators.
Determined to find some answers, detectives head to the place where Chris spent the bulk of his time. The bar he left just minutes before he was gunned down.
Investigators need to start interviewing people and going around to figure out exactly who Chris Mader is. They needed to really figure out what happened the night before. Was there any altercations or anything that would raise a red flag to them?
But the young bartender's manager echoes the sentiment of friends and family. Chris was the kind of guy you couldn't help but love.
Chris helped me out through breakups, through, problems, talking to him about my mom's death when I would get down. He was always there with a shoulder whenever I needed one. And I know he was like that for a lot of people. He wasn't just a bartender, he was a friend.
Police review the bar's surveillance tapes from the night of the murder, but they don't reveal anything suspicious.
There's nothing that came out of his jobs that would indicate anyone had anything but good things to say about Chris. No motive there.
However, the manager does mention that he heard Chris had a run-in with several customers the night of his murder. He points police in the direction of some staffers who witnessed the scuffle firsthand.
Police went out to a flag football game where a lot of the bar employees were playing in an annual game.
When officers arrive at the game around 8 that morning, Chris's teammates explain that he was supposed to be there, but they haven't seen him yet. They figured he was just running late, until detectives tell them the terrible truth.
Chris Mader's co-workers were devastated by this. I mean, this is someone that they had just worked with just a few hours before, who had left them and was driving home on Thanksgiving morning, and he was murdered in cold blood.
While some of his co-workers are too grief-stricken to talk, a few describe what went down at the bar last night. One of Chris's fellow bartenders tells police Chris was in a great mood, until a couple of patrons got a little too rowdy at the bar.
Apparently earlier in the night, there were two guys inside of the bar. There was some sort of argument, something just wasn't clicking. They ended up getting thrown out.
Chris's cohorts say they didn't recognize either customer, but each clearly had one too many. And when Chris cut them off, they got angry, leaving him no choice but to show them the door.
That is something that investigators needed to look at. They needed to figure out who these guys were. They needed to figure out where they went after they left the bar. And they needed to figure out where they were at the time Chris Mader was murdered.
Did the drunk duo get even rowdier after hours? No one saw the men after they were given the boot. But detectives think they could have easily waited and followed Chris home when he clocked out at 3.
At that point, anything is fair game. Investigators have to go down every single avenue. No stone can be left unturned.
Police check the bar records and find the men paid with credit cards, so they easily ID them as 22-year-old Tony Caban and 25-year-old Ross Brady. And when police check their prior records, they find that Tony has a reputation for losing his temper.
It appeared as if he had some criminal history. He had had some convictions for some assaults and things like that. And so investigators sort of zoned in on that and on his background.
If the detective's hunch is on the money, Tony's credit card may just lead them to pay dirt. The day after Thanksgiving 2004, just 24 hours after 23-year-old Chris Mader was gunned down in cold blood, the grief is still raw. John Gregan has lived just down the street from Chris's family for years and knows their hearts must be breaking.
As a parent, I have children his age, you definitely identify with that. You just can't imagine them being here one minute and not being there the next. You just don't think that can happen.
Chris's shell-shocked friend, Liz Moeller, keeps replaying the tragedy in her mind, wondering if trouble at the restaurant followed the bartender home.
When I found out Chris was murdered, one of the first questions I asked was if someone had been kicked out of the bar that night. If there was a customer that would have had any reason to be mad at Chris. That was one of the first questions I had.
And detectives may be about to answer Liz's question. They're hot on the trail of two rowdy drunks Chris kicked out of the bar just hours before he was killed.
With bar receipts, investigators were able to track these two guys down rather quickly and were able to learn that
One of the guys lived in the area.
His name is Tony Caban, and his criminal record is littered with assault charges. Police wonder if maybe Tony's temper got the best of him that night.
that he was kicked out and he was angry at the motive.
Investigators find 22-year-old Tony living at his parents' house in the next town over. He answers the door disheveled and reeking of alcohol, and when they tell him a Bennigan's bartender's been murdered, his head really starts spinning. He tells police the details of the night are fuzzy, but he's sure he didn't kill anyone.
What he said was that he was kicked out, he and his buddy got in a cab, and they went home.
When detectives ask for a cab receipt, Tony tells them his friend, Ross Brady, paid for the taxi. Tony says Ross will confirm his story. Armed with Ross's address, police head over to his house just a couple of blocks away to see if the two men's alibis match up.
So the second guy tells investigators the same exact story as the first guy, as his buddy. And he was also able to provide them with a receipt from the cab they took home from the bar that night.
The receipt checks out, and detectives track down the cab driver, who confirms Tony and Ross's story, saying he dropped each at separate houses. While it's possible one or both men got into their own car later to find Chris, it doesn't seem very likely.
Once the investigation shakes out regarding the fight that had happened at the bar and these two individuals, it was pretty clear that they had nothing to do with this. And they were ruled out of this investigation.
3 days pass, and while investigators work to unearth new leads, Chris's family and friends lay him to rest.
Chris's memorial service, it was very emotional for everybody there. I don't think there was a dry eye in the house. Seeing his mom there, she was just a wreck.
Knowing just how missed Chris really is makes investigators even more determined to land a suspect. But despite their best efforts, come Christmas time, there isn't a new lead in sight. So, a month into the investigation, police come up with a plan B.
Police don't have much to work with, and so they hope that a reward will stimulate someone to come forward. It's worked in the past. They figure it'll work this time. If we put some money up, maybe somebody will call with the key clue we need to solve this case.
The pot starts out at a cool 25 grand, but the community mobilizes, and locals line up to sweeten the deal.
The reward for information leading to Chris's death kept climbing and climbing and climbing. Businesses were donating money. His friends, myself, we never gave up hope. There was a dinner where all the funds raised were going towards his reward. So people definitely didn't give up.
And when the reward money more than doubles, investigators are certain something will come of it. However, despite dozens of calls, not one lead pans out.
One by one, they ruled out all the potential suspects, all the potential motives, and they ended up sort of empty-handed.
As the months pass, police start to lose hope.
It was a very cold case, ice-cold case. It was truly a mystery because no one could really come up with any obvious motive that would cause someone to kill Chris.
To not know why someone took your friend away, to not know why this person who was so genuinely nice and just a great person all around, to not know why this person was taken too soon. It was heartbreaking. And to know that his family had to live every single day, and his mom especially, to wake up and not have her son there every single day, it was very, very heartbreaking.
And while police continue to work the case, they aren't having much luck.
The police were relentless. They held news conference after news conference after news conference. They distributed flyers all over Waldorf, up and down Route 301, Route 5, all around. They distributed flyers.
With each passing holiday, Chris's family wonders if they'll ever find the answers they need to move on. Then, 3 years after Chris's murder, police receive some information out of the blue that jumpstarts the investigation.
In the spring of 2007, a letter came into the Charles County Sheriff's Office. It was from a guy who had information about the murder of Chris Mader.
The informant is an inmate serving time in a local Maryland prison on an arson conviction. And this fire starter claims to know something police don't: the identity of Chris Mader's killer.
This informant, Alston Hecker, had pointed the finger at a guy that he met inside of the Maryland prison, a guy by the name of Matt Corral. And Matt had given him some information about the murder of Chris Mader.
In the letter, Austin writes that he recently overheard Matt bragging about Chris's shooting death to other inmates. At first, police take this information with a grain of salt.
I think investigators at first were thinking that was, all right, who is this guy? Who is this informant? And what does he have to gain by sending us this information?
There's a chance Austin might be lying to shave some time off his sentence, but there's no denying what Austin has to say sure is intriguing.
Information in this letter was information that had not been released to the public at all. There were some investigative pieces that were indicated to investigators that this person had valid information, and they needed to talk to him right away.
Information investigators just can't ignore. And a look into the accused's past has detectives thinking they might be on the right track.
It appeared as if Matt had a pretty lengthy criminal history. There were some drug charges, assaults, things like that in his background. And so investigators sort of zoned in on that.
Although Matt's never been brought up on a murder charge before, police know there's a first time for everything.
When this letter came in to the Charles County Sheriff's Office, it was huge. It was a name. It was valid information. It was a great lead for detectives to be able to move forward with and follow up on.
I told you nothing was going to restore my
Is
regular
this
sleeping
jailbird telling the
pattern
truth?
and help
Or
me
is he
sleep
throwing
better.
an innocent man under the bus in his quest for some cold, hard cash?
I'm still wide awake, fully awake, after the medication.
This season sounds like, looks like, feels like.
I do.
This summer, I do. On the Dove Channel.
Man, I'm so excited about the next chapter in Dad's car build.
Well, you ready?
I guess we're ready. I mean, soon that car will be a running car. One day I'll be able to look back on this and be like, wow, I was living. Looking forward to next year, you know, it's going to be just as much, if not more, of a crazy year.
I told you I'm recording every single night so you can see what I go through, but you refuse to look at it.
That no greater love has ever been shown to my family. Let's do it!
They're gonna freak out.
Welcome home. It's all about folks coming together to help one of their own.
Great guests, great stories, and some of my favorite people.
Incredibly good. Let them watch it. Decide for themselves.
How do you know that? Because we've done research.
Best of our time.
Join me on the Grand North Show channel for non-stop classic Norton.
It's been 3 years since bartender Chris Mader was shot to death early Thanksgiving Day in 2004. And the citizens of Waldorf are eager for justice to be served.
The community wanted to see the crime solved, and it had not been solved.
Even as the years pass, Chris's killing is always in the back of residents' minds.
It was constantly in the paper. I mean, you'd see the reward still out there, and I think they did a real good job of really keeping it on the forefront.
And no one wants closure more than Chris's family and friends, haunted every Thanksgiving by his memory.
Every single holiday, his mom has to think about that. You know, this is the day that someone took my son away from me. And a day that's supposed to be filled with family and love, she's dealing with tragedy. All of us were. but especially his family.
But detectives haven't given up hope of solving Chris's case, and it now seems their prayers may have been answered. Police are working a hot tip from an inmate serving time for arson in a Maryland prison. Austin Hecker was so concerned when he recently heard fellow jailbird Matt Corral bragging about Chris's murder that he put it all in writing.
Matt's name had never come up in this murder investigation for the first few years. It wasn't until that letter came down to the Charles County Sheriff's Office that his name was even put on anyone's radar.
Investigators now have their eye on Matt, a lifelong troublemaker whose criminal record is littered with assault and drug charges. But police aren't entirely convinced Matt's to blame for Chris's murder.
Matt's criminal history raised some red flags, but he was never charged or convicted of murder. So yeah, he had a criminal history, but does that equal pulling the trigger and killing someone? Some things just weren't adding up.
Before detectives track down the recent parolee, they want to make sure that the inmate who ratted him out isn't just blowing smoke. So police quickly round up this jailbird and put him under the spotlight, determined to find out if his story about Matt Corral is fact or fiction.
The informant was willing to share what he knew about Chris Mader's death. He was willing to give that information over. But on the flip side, this is someone who's incarcerated. You have to wonder what this person wants in return.
When police ask Austin why he's coming forward, his motive is loud and clear. He's hoping to hit the $60,000 jackpot.
He was interested in the reward money. There was a substantial reward offered for information leading to the arrest and conviction of Chris Mader's killer. And this informant was aware of that.
Austin repeats the same tale that was in his letter, insisting he overheard Matt telling several other inmates that he shot a young bartender. And when Austin tells detectives Matt mentioned that Chris's window was down when he was shot, investigators know Austin's story is right on the money.
Austin had information about the murder of Chris Mader that had never been released to the public.
Since Austin was behind bars when Chris was killed, they know he's not the man they're looking for, but maybe Matt is. For now, investigators tell Austin he won't be able to claim the money until the killer is caught, and they send him back to the big house. But while detectives have found ex-con Matt Corral living in King George, Virginia, just 30 minutes away from Waldorf, they hold off on making contact. If he's indeed Chris's killer, they don't want to let him know they're on to him.
You only have one shot at moving forward with a successful prosecution. You don't get two shots at this. And investigators really wanted to pick up every single thing that they could along the way and gather as much evidence as possible to move forward with an arrest, but more importantly, a successful prosecution.
So detectives keep an eye on Matt while they pry a little deeper into his past.
They're digging up anything on his history. They're looking into other people around him. They're trying to figure out if he was even at the restaurant or bar where Chris Mader worked the night he was killed.
And as investigators scour police reports for Matt's prior arrests, they realize this bad boy seldom got into trouble on his own. He usually had a partner in crime.
There's a name that kept coming up, a guy by the name of Brent Wakeman. Matt and Brent ran in the same circles. They had the same group of friends, and they hung out together.
Police aren't sure who the ringleader is. Could be either one. After all, like his buddy, Brent has a lengthy rap sheet.
I was familiar with Brent Wakeman. There was rumors of drug use and possibly selling of drugs.
And these two hoodlums have one place where they like to cause trouble.
Waldorf is a pretty small town, and Bennigan's was the center for a lot of people to go to and hang out with their friends and just have a good time. Matt and Brent had been in the bar enough to know Chris, and for Chris to recognize them as well.
Sure sounds like police need to get their hands on these two. And Brent isn't hard to find. He's just been booked into the local jail on assault charges after getting into a brawl at a party over a girl. When investigators bring Brent into the interrogation room, he seems calm and collected. But when they show him Chris's picture, he immediately loses his cool.
He wasn't really willing to cooperate with investigators. He was scared. He was nervous.
Detectives push a little harder and Brent breaks down, confessing that he and Matt do know Chris. But Brent says they weren't exactly friendly, which is strange since Chris was known for being buds with most of his customers.
He was always very nice to them, treated them like he would any other customer. But Chris would never, go out of his way to say hi or anything like that. I think that Chris could tell that they weren't the greatest people to be in cahoots with.
Brent swears he didn't kill Chris Mader, and when police ask him where he was the night before Thanksgiving, he lawyers up. But he does tell detectives if they want to find out who murdered the young bartender, they need to speak with his buddy, Jake Mallard.
Jake Mallard was a friend of Brent's and Matt's. It appeared that he had been charged with some things in the past, some drug charges, but nothing on the surface that seems that he would be in any sort of trouble with the police.
Jake has stayed out of trouble for the past few years and is living one town over from Waldorf. Investigators are about to find out Jake's sitting on a secret that's about to blow the case wide open.
It really gives me goosebumps because this was a cold case with no leads. Finally, a lead that went somewhere.
It's been 5 years since charming bartender Chris Mader was gunned down on Thanksgiving Day 2004. And investigators believe a local thug named Matt Carell might be the trigger man. Now, they've learned his friend, Jake Mallard, has an inside scoop that could lead to Matt's arrest, giving new hope to Chris's family and friends.
I never gave up that little bit of hope that whoever was responsible for this would be held accountable. I think we all knew that someone was going to be held accountable.
When detectives show up at Jake's door, he's shell-shocked. And he's downright jittery under police questioning.
Jake did not seem like someone who would murder someone. He seemed someone who was afraid that what he said would be held against him.
And when detectives start quizzing Jake, they can tell why he's so worried. He makes a startling revelation.
Jake was able to tell them that the night before Chris Mader was murdered, that he, Brent, and Matt were all at the bar together.
And Jake recalls Matt said something that made a routine boys' night out turn into something else altogether.
There was a conversation at the bar at some point between Jake and Matt. And apparently Matt said something to Jake that he had a problem with someone at the bar. He wanted to beat someone up. But Jake didn't think anything about it.
Jake did guess Matt was talking about Chris, because he knew Matt long wanted to knock the bartender off his high horse. Seems he was jealous of Chris's pretty boy looks and the good money he made slinging drinks. So Matt decided to rob Chris of his tip money to take him down a peg. And Jake admits he willingly went along when Brent and Matt followed Chris out the door after last call.
Jake, Brent, and Matt all got into the car. Matt was sitting up front in the passenger seat. Brent was driving. Jake was in the back seat. And they were in fact following Chris Mader. Chris did not know that trailing behind him were 3 guys in a vehicle.
As Jake continues his impromptu confession, he says what went down next still gives him nightmares. He explains that as Chris turns onto Smallwood Drive, just a few blocks from his house, all hell breaks loose when Brent's car bumps Chris's off the road.
The car hits some electrical boxes or cable boxes as it went off the road and crashed.
Before Chris realizes what's happening, Matt is standing right next to him, demanding that he roll down the window. Chris does. And after a few choice words between the two men, Matt opens fire, killing Chris instantly. An act of violence that shocks Jake and Brent.
Jake and Brent had no idea that Matt was carrying a gun with him until the gun went off. Then they knew that there was serious trouble there at the scene.
The two are so spooked, they speed off, leaving Matt behind near Chris's car.
So at this point, Matt doesn't have a way out of there. He has nowhere to go.
Matt takes off on foot and disappears into the night. So scared he forgets to check Chris's car for cash.
Once that trigger was pulled, the dynamic of the crime changes. So no money was taken. Nothing was taken except the life of Chris Mader.
In exchange for Jake's cooperation, investigators don't charge him with the crime.
They were grateful because he was one of the missing pieces to complete this puzzle.
Detectives now use Jake's confession to pay his pal Brent a second visit, hoping to seal the deal on Matt's guilt. Faced with Jake's first-hand account of the killing, Brent breaks down. In exchange for a promise to testify, investigators drop charges against him.
At this point, with all of these dots connecting, investigators knew that they were getting so close to catching Chris's killer and to finally issue that warrant, make the arrest, and move forward with the trial.
6 years after Chris Mader's murder, detectives confront Matt Corral at his home. Even with the confessions of Jake and Brent, Matt doesn't own up to the killing, and after evading a round of questions, he lawyers up. But it's too late.
Investigators finally had enough to issue an arrest warrant to put Matt in handcuffs, which they did, but he never said anything about any involvement with Chris's death.
Matt Corral is charged with first-degree murder for the killing of Chris Mader, which shocks everyone.
I found out the police had charged Matt because an old coworker of mine sent me a link to the newspaper, and I was overjoyed. I was very happy that someone was finally being held accountable for what happened to Chris.
Out of the blue, I was ambushed by that news. I mean, Chris Mader, they solved the Chris Mader case, stopped the press. It was big news, it was shocking news, but for the people in Waldorf, great news, great relief, great sense of justice.
On June 29, 2012, almost 8 years after the murder of Chris Mader, Matt Corral is tried and found guilty of first-degree murder. He's sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Yet Matt maintains his innocence and is appealing his conviction. Chris's friends and family can only hope he'll stay behind bars forever.
It's very heartbreaking and very frustrating. Why would you do this to someone who wouldn't hurt a fly? Someone who was so genuinely nice to everybody that walked through that door. Why would you choose somebody like that?
Getting Chris's killer off the street is some consolation to Chris's friends and neighbors.
It gives some closure to it. We don't have to live with this constant fear that kind of runs through you. That you just go about your daily business, driving from point to A to B, like Chris was. You're safe to do that again. I think that's a big relief to any community.
Chris's loved ones can find some solace in the memories of Chris and his winning smile.
We really talk about what a great guy he was and what Chris meant to people. Chris is never going to be forgotten. He's always going to be loved and he's always going to be missed.
Domino's Best Deal Ever is back. Any hand-tossed pan, thin crust, or New York-style pizza with any toppings for just $9.99 online. Last time you got
Sausage, bacon, chicken, cheese, beef, buffalo sauce.
What are you gonna get this time? Get Domino's $9.99 Best Deal Ever before it's gone.
say beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and there's nothing more beautiful than our Earth. With Earth Day 365, we embrace nature's amazing diversity. We celebrate the heroes who unlock its mysteries and protect its future. Explore your world every day on Earth Day 365.
Drug trafficking, murder for hire.
We can still call upon retired detectives.
You're joking, weren't you?
You think I was old enough to have more sense?
Bingo.
I want you lot to work the streets tonight.
Unsolved crime case squad.
Don't you get smart with me. Still got it.
Watch New Tricks on the Silent Witness and New Tricks channel.
On the road to visit her boyfriend, 18-year-old Lisa Marie Kimmel takes a detour right off the map.
By the time it passed 2 or 3 days, I think everybody had a pretty bad feeling that this was not going to end well.
Police fear she ran into something evil on her 8-hour journey.
It's just one long stretch of highway. It's the perfect area to commit any sort of a crime.
When local fishermen reel in a grisly discovery, everyone's worst fears are realized.
The last days were probably a little,
Only through the relentless work of investigators is the dark secret finally unearthed.
It was like opening a grave.
It was so creepy. The hair on the back of his neck stood up.
How well do you know your neighbors? What lies behind the white picket fences?